And welcome to this episode. Welcome to this episode of season 3 of the Dr. Tech Show, where myself, Pauline Roche, and Sweyn Hunter, and sometimes guests, talk about digital topics, including the world of online communications and digital inclusion, in a show which was the brainchild of digital storyteller, the late John Popham. And today we're joined by Paul Finnis. We're very delighted to have him as our guest today. Paul is the Chief Executive at the Learning Foundation and the founder of the Digital Poverty Alliance. So let's do a weather check. Paul, where are you coming from and what's the weather like there?
Great. I love being asked that question. I'm in Ascot, which you'll know not least because tomorrow, for the next few days, we're just full of very well dressed alcoholics, mainly. I think that's the thing. But and in theory, horse lovers. It is warm and sunny, but with that impending thunderstorm, which we've been waiting for about a week now, and things. So we'll see what happens. But thanks. How are things with you?
Very good. Sweyn, well, in Birmingham, it's sunny. I've come from Essex this morning, where it was beautifully sunny. Now it's kind of grey skies, but it's still sunshine. So I'm going to enjoy that a bit later on. Sweyn, what about you? You've been travelling around the country as well.
Yes, it's a bit like Dr. Tech on the road this week. I'm in Glasgow today. I've got a family occasion on Wednesday, which I'm looking forward to greatly. And the weather here is, well, from my point of view, ridiculously hot, but then it always is when I go 200 miles south, so that's nothing, but it's lovely and sunny and kind of not too hot actually.
And what transport did you use to get there?
I got a lift from the long-suffering Jenny to the airport. I flew to Aberdeen on the 25 to 8 flight, and then I got a train, despite some disruption on the line, to Glasgow by about 12:30.
Okay, not
so
bad
it was
at all.
easy.
Yeah, good. Okay, well, let's go straight to Paul, who's able to join us today. Paul and I have been kind of in touch on social media over the last number of months, maybe a year, me admiring all the work that you've been doing, Paul, and us kind of tuning in to see, and also we have had Ciara Allman and Freddie Queck on as guests here. So we're good friends with the Digital Poverty Alliance. And I know that you're well connected around the rest of this network. But let's give a bit of background to you, Paul. You're the CEO, as I said, of the Learning Foundation and founder of the Digital Poverty Alliance. You've worked in the NGO sector for 35 years. And in the last 20 years, you've seen a closer focus on education, from helping to set up the British Council for School Environments to leading a British education NGO in Vietnam for 7 years. You've seen firsthand the power that the right intervention in education has to profoundly change lives, and you believe strongly in transparency and ensuring genuine change is delivered. The Learning Foundation is 21 years old now and works directly with schools looking to introduce technology into learning as part of their toolkit for teachers and students. You have 3 watchwords for every program: equitable, effective, and sustainable. In 2018, you launched the Digital Access for All, working with Nominate UK and a group of partners aimed at ensuring every school-aged child in the UK has the access, skills, and support they need to in the digital world at home for learning and life. And the pandemic demonstrated just how important that ambition was and continues to be. And you and your team are now working hard to respond to urgent need, focus on a sustainable strategic response to this issue through establishing the Digital Poverty Alliance with Curry's PLC and the Institution of Engineering and Technology, and an expansive community of individuals and organisations with a shared purpose to end digital poverty once and for all by 2030. The Digital Poverty Alliance launched its UK Evidence Review in June 2022 and the National Delivery Plan in May 2023, providing a route map for national and local government, companies, the third sector and authorities to better understand the issue and to actively engage in the process of change. As your Twitter says, you're at your happiest when delivering real change with and for others. So you're very welcome to the show, and I think both of us, very much kind of go along with those kind of sentiments. And our sadly missed founder, John Popham, would have had a lot in common, I think. He would have been actively engaged in all of the initiatives that are going on. So we miss him very much. I don't know if you ever met John, Paul, in your career. No,
sadly not. But I love the fact that you and keep his name alive, very much so. I mean, you always talk about him, always mentioning himself, and that for me is like it's like an example of heaven, isn't it? You know, the fact that you continue to be mentioned normally in good spirits and stuff.
I think
Yeah.
John would have something pithy to say about that, I'm sure. But yes.
Absolutely great.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, so welcome to the show, Paul. As I say,
Thank
we're
you.
delighted you were able to join us. We usually ask our guests, and I hope you'll indulge us, about their early career in digital, because not everybody came into it at the same time. So, can you give us a
No.
bit of background about your early life, and then when you discovered the internet and all that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I have to say that I don't regard myself at all as a techie. I have to say, so I have to say that some of the episodes that I've watched of the Dr. Tech Show are get into areas, particularly you too, Sweyn. I know areas which I'm not entirely clear about.
That's why to watch the recording. That's what the fast forward button is for.
Yeah, I have used that on occasions and stuff, but then you might miss something, so you have to be careful, But So I'm really, I suppose, all about kind of equity is the thing that interests me, and I think that equity is something that begins to break down, at a very young age, unfortunately. And if society, the community, whoever has a responsibility here, doesn't get involved early enough, then youngsters find themselves being excluded ever more so, and that happens at a very early age. And so I've always been keen, because I don't know about you, but I believe absolutely that everybody's born with the same opportunities, or ought to be born with the same opportunities, certainly mentally and physically and things, and then it depends on the environment they're brought up in and who they're with and things. And just about that, by the way, one of the teachers that talked at one of the teachers we work with on the Learning Foundation was talking the other day to me, and he said that he's working with 4th generation unemployed families,
Wow.
and and he says it because because people just don't recognize that that's going on. That's probably getting on with 100 years or something of a family who. So, and that just I don't know. I also, as I get older, I begin to look back and think, so what's changed really? And depending on how optimistic, I'm not normally quite optimistic, but often when I look back, I'm quite pessimistic at seeing how little's changed. And so I sometimes wonder about, I don't know, lots of things get tweaked, particularly with schools. And if you're a school teacher, you'll know that a constant barrage of tweaking and things, rather than significant change. And for me, I've seen how digital, particularly since I've been at the Learning Foundation, how you can put an iPad in young people's hands, and of course it could be anything at all. Of course, a laptop, whatever. But their eyes brighten up straight away. And actually, it doesn't matter if they're quite used to having these kind of things. If it's part of their schoolwork suddenly, they're like, wow. And that doesn't go away, interestingly enough. It's not something that is just for the day because it's new and everything else. It's something that, and I get that it has to be managed and has to be, supported properly, and people have to be trained and all those kind of things. Of course, I understand that, which is why, for me, schools is such a great place to be introducing young people into this side, because I'm aware of all the kind of dangers and things as well.
Can you remember your early introduction? What was your first computer and so on?
I am in my 60s now, so I was there when they first turned. I was we had golf ball typewriters and stuff, you remember, and things, and those were all terribly flashy and modern and stuff. I love that. So the first time a word processor actually was a word processor turned up, I ran a publishing company for a while, and it so revolutionized the way that we worked and stuff at that time. It was extraordinary. But I remember the first time sitting down there, but of course no kind of windows or anything at those times. It was just a kind of blank screen with a sort of flashing C cursor. There's exactly and
incomprehensible codes to do things like go bold or go italic or
go home. So I was very tentative, but always intrigued about it, and I've seen that mirrored in my particularly my eldest youngster, who's now just come 11 next weekend. Is seeing that enjoyment of it, and I've always enjoyed it. I used to play games, including that. Do you remember the table tennis thing?
Pong.
Play that for hours.
Do you play games now? Do you find yourself playing games now?
My work life has been too busy, but the answer is yes, I do. I just started going back to it. I don't get enough time to do it. So my youngster and I don't yet play together, but I'm sure we will at some point or other. But one of the things I've marveled at is the quality of graphics that changes and stuff. And for me, I suppose, as a youngster, I guess I would have been mid-20s when sort of internet and everything else became, much more kind of available and things, that I used to think, wow, wouldn't it be great if one day, and actually we are there now. I see the quality
Yeah.
of games is amazing.
Absolutely.
So, but yeah, no,
Yeah,
I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the experience, but more on a personal side, I suppose, than work. Increasingly, I've seen it being part of work, and that's, well, of course, why now the Digital Poverty Alliance and Learning Foundation is where it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I find it remarkable that my brother, my younger brother, who I saw this weekend, and my nephew in Ireland are playing chess together online, and doing really well. And my brother is saying that my nephew has improved, which is great to hear, great for both of them. But it's, I mean, my brother also has actual physical games of chess, 3 or 4 boards in the house as well. He's really into chess, but it's lovely to see the generations, playing, because digital level is a level playing field, isn't it? You don't have to be the same age to do things online. You can be, different ages, and it works.
I love that line. Sorry, Sweyn.
No.
I love that line about a kind of an equal, isn't it? Just, I hadn't actually thought about it just between generations like that, but it can. For me, I've always had this picture in my head, particularly with this kind of school and access to digital. There is that if children of a certain age, let's say 14 or 15, sort of a point when they're beginning to make really important decisions about who they are and where they and school and that kind of stuff. There's something for me with the picture, but we said it doesn't matter what the surroundings are like, and they are going to be significantly different from one youngster to, living in one room kind of thing through to. But if they have a laptop and they have internet connectivity and with the same sort of levels of skills and stuff, then the same world is open to them. How they then use it, of course, is up to them still. And but there is something kind of leveling about that. And at the moment, that player field is just not level.
No.
Some very, very large numbers of children and young people obviously have access to things at home, even if they're not using it at school. But so many just don't, and that seems to me intrinsically unfair.
And so, what would you say inspired you to get involved in this world? Because you've been doing it for quite a long time now. What was the original inspiration? What brought you from, say, publishing to where you are now?
Well, actually, I would probably have to say my youngest brother. My youngest brother suffers from schizophrenia, and I saw that the really enormous effort that he had to go to, but also how unable or society was to respond to the issues at the time and things, and I felt at that time that I wanted to do more, so I began to investigate it. And in fact, the first charity I worked for full time was a mental health charity, and I'd love to go back to that. And of course, it's really important around digital too, because it can be a positive enabler. I've always loved the idea, for instance, where for instance, children in care, particularly when they're leaving care, rather than being suddenly cut off for everything, and that absolutely is quite a kind of black and white. They just suddenly they're supported and suddenly they're not. Is that they can make connections with whoever they want, wherever they want, whenever they want. It could be 3 o'clock in the morning, when you're in crisis, rather than having to wait till some office opens the following day. And But so
I did a hackathon some years ago now, a health one, and a group of young people there wanted to create a chatbot that would just enable somebody who was in crisis to just find a resource wherever they were. So like they might have been, say, based in live in Birmingham, but be visiting friends in Manchester or London or whatever, and they could use the chatbot to immediately find a resource that wasn't dependent on their home base. They could it is
time of day and things. Because we all find, don't we? We find one of the things I love again about the internet is that it doesn't have to be somebody next door or in the same town or village, whatever. It could be somebody in a completely different country that you begin to find similarities with and connections with.
I mean, I suffer from poor mental health at times myself, and I found from about 2007 onwards, things like playing backgammon on MSN games with people in New Zealand or people just random. Really, it really was literally at random. Was really good if it just kept my mind sort of occupied and distracted from anything it might have wanted to do. And also, I mean, I have all sorts of friends, of whom John Popham was one, and Pauline is another, who I have never yet met. in person.
No.
Oh, I've got friends in New
extraordinary.
Zealand and friends in all time zones, because sometimes I'm very awake far too much of the day, and other times I'm asleep most of the time. And when I found things like Second Life and MSN Games and all that sort of thing, it really was a fabulous thing to channel my energy into when I had too much of it to spare.
Wonderful. Do you have in Orkney? Do you have the the long days?
Yes,
and
we do.
You do.
We do.
Well,
That's not something
that
that's
throws
not
you out.
something that particularly affects me, really.
Okay.
But we do. Yes, at the moment it barely gets dark, and in December it
gets
is
light.
very dark.
Oh,
Yeah, no, it does get light, but it's
yes. My other half is from Vietnam, and so I know she struggles during the not just wearing 27 layers of clothing. Just if it falls below 30 degrees, she's like, what? But also just lack of sunshine. There's that kind of vitamin D and the seasonal affective disorder and stuff.
No, it is definitely a thing. But anyway, that's just my little contribution. Since you mentioned kind of digital and mental health benefits of digital, I think there are lots there that we sometimes don't make enough of.
No.
Well, we were talking about that last week, weren't we, Sweyn? When it was Loneliness Week, we tend to pick up awareness weeks, and we kind of were saying that digital has its place in alleviating loneliness for so many people, and obviously during lockdown, it really came into its own. But we were talking about your kind of early career, Paul, and you said you went from kind of a mental health charity, and then you kind of progressed. And did you see digital becoming a part of the work you were doing?
Yes, I did, and I went from the mental health charity to work with Age Concern England. And one of the other things, I don't know about you guys, but again, one of the other things that I'd see going around, Tesco's or one of the big supermarkets or whatever, and just see all the people, and they're having to make decisions about what they put in their basket or not, and I just broke my heart. And so luckily a job came up working for with somebody called Sally Greengross, Baroness Greengross at the time, who was quite a figurehead, I have to say. She was quite extraordinary. And so the opportunity came up working with them, and that was absolutely I think that was where I was when the kind of golf ball typewriter became the word processor, much more.
The Amstrad PCW almost.
all of that and stuff. And so I suppose my work has kind of mirrored in a way. Everybody's does, doesn't it, to a certain extent, particularly our age, but mirrors the change. And so it became ever more. One thing I would say, I suppose, in 2007, I did go to Vietnam, and one of the reasons I went to Vietnam was I had been working for these big charities and things, and there's a bit of me that sometimes worries about how much change they bring. They sometimes, because there's so many staff members and everything, they spend all their time fundraising for, and wondered about what sort of change was going on and stuff. So I went to Vietnam to kind of remind myself, and again, an opportunity came working for a British education NGO over there. And there was something really lovely about that. You see a youngster not in school, and absolutely, you could almost say it didn't always happen like that, but why are you not in school? What have we got to put? Well, and here's some money to help the family get you into school and stuff. That was really good. And while I was there, tech really got much stronger in the education field. Same here in the UK, I think. But it's stopped enough in the UK. It stopped. In sort of 2010, partly because of the crisis and everything else, it pretty much stopped. It struggled on a bit under people like Charles Clarke and things under the Labour government. In those
less so in Scotland and Wales, I think, than in England as well.
Completely. I've seen some fantastic stuff going on in Scotland, particularly. I agree.
The Glow intranet, as it's called, the national initiative that connects all schools together, and it's just amazing. It's weird. It's kind of refined itself or reformed itself as more or less a Teams installation across the whole of the Scottish schools estate. It's now more or less MS Teams everywhere, with bits added on and safeguards and all the rest of it. But even in Scotland and also in Wales, a lot more could have been done if there'd been just a little bit more money.
Money. And I think using Scotland as an example, and you're absolutely great to raise it, because it really is important that, as I say, I love the kind of commitments that Scotland have made. I mean, in Scotland, their digital strategy for education says equates digital literacy with literacy and numeracy.
Yes.
So actually,
Mhm.
and as soon as a government says that, it then has to act on that, of
That's
course.
right.
But in
And
England, we don't
the
have
other
that
thing
at
I was
all.
impressed by Wales. I went to a webinar last week, or was it this week? Oh, some recently, about by Simeon Yates.
Yes,
It was
great. I love
it was
Simeon.
your
That was DPA one, yeah.
DPA
Yeah.
webinar.
Mm.
What a fantastic session that was.
Yeah.
I thoroughly recommend the recording of that if you missed it. And that was just it was great to see that Wales has actually taken that concept of the minimum digital living standard and actually adopted it as a thing.
Yes.
It doesn't necessarily mean they'll spend loads of money on it, but
No.
they've adopted the principle, which is
No.
a good kind of first step.
So
More than a
raises
first
so
step.
many things. So
Yeah.
many. Yeah. I mean, so think about paying for it. You know, whose responsibility is it? And again, using Scotland as an example, they've made this wonderful commitment that they want to ensure that every school-aged child has access to their own device. Initially, that was within the current parliamentary term, which I think for some reason ends in 2026. So after
Yes.
the Westminster elections and stuff.
Yes.
But what they've found is that they've known this all along, because Scotland's always been leading in this area, is that it's not, of course, just about a device and connectivity, it's about everything else goes with it. And so where I know they're struggling is that teachers, and I know they're on strike again in a couple of weeks' time. What they're saying to their unions and others is, look, we are professionals, right? If you want us to use digital to help support our children as they grow, for whatever reason, partly from learning, but partly about, you know, being part of, associated with life and everything else, then you need to help us to do that. You can't just chuck a device at a child and let them get on, you know, we want support. It's not part of current CPD training. It's not part of even initial teacher training at the moment. And so there is a bit of a gap, which means to say that lots of people want to affect change in the classroom and elsewhere, but you need to make sure that people can and they're equipped to do it. One survey we did at DPA earlier on showed that half of all the teachers didn't have access to a device at home that they needed, let alone the kids.
Yeah.
Because
Which,
you know,
which,
sorry.
which kind of echoes the I mean, Ciara Allen writes so eloquently about all this, and I know you know her material, but you know, when she writes about people moving in and out of digital inclusion, in and out of digital poverty, it's so true. And I've referenced that many times in my work now, and it's great to have that the backup of kind of the evidence that shows that, and that not to be complacent. We can't be complacent that people are either excluded or included. It's a movable feast. Yeah.
Yeah. People tend to think this is I think they tend to think about this as for poverty anyway, is that's a kind of them problem.
Over there, yeah.
They're sort of self-inflicted in it, that kind of thing. And one of the things I'm at pains to point out is that it's not a them thing.
No.
This is an us thing,
yes.
For two reasons. One is we will all go in and out of poverty at some digital poverty at some point or other. If not poverty, of course, we've all been there in and out. Luckily, you know, maybe our circumstances meant we've been able to come through and so. But also, we're talking about UK PLC. If something like a third of the adult working population doesn't have the skills to use digital effectively for a work reason, then that's going to affect productivity and skill sets for recruitment and all those kind of pieces. And so this is a UK PLC thing. I'm pleased to say that one of the big consultancy firms at the moment, Deloitte, is working on a piece around socioeconomic benefits. And the point about that absolutely is going to be yes, there are personal individual reasons why that it's right to do this, to support people, but this is a big picture thing too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean it's blatantly obvious, and like we've had Emma Weston from Digital Unite on the program previously. Great digital champion of champions. And like I'm involved in some of her programs in my work as well, and they ran a great program, Digital Health Champions, recently with the NHS, and Capgemini also worked with them to develop a program, getting their employees involved. And it's great for the employees to feel that kind of social glow of helping other people, but also, if you're helping somebody so that they're financially better off than they were before, economically, more advantaged, then that's better for the economy and better for us. So it's the rising tide that floats all boats. We need to see ourselves as part of that community, that doing something, helping somebody else is helping ourselves as well at the end of the day.
Yeah, they said that about volunteering, and and I have to say my time at Age Concern was a good example. It's called Age UK now, of course, but Age Concern at the time was partly driven by the idea that one day I'm going to be older, and here I am now. And I didn't really want the kind of Age Concern Day Centre to be the only thing I had to look forward to, and so there is some self-interest here. And tomorrow I'm helping to host a group of older people's charities, including Age UK and things, to look at older people and digital, because again, there's lots of talk on it, but not very many people. Doesn't seem to be much action, and the thing about that is that there is this concept, this idea about you do come across these sort of tech natives and young people, and Kira is great at bursting that particular bubble.
Absolutely.
The same thing happens with older people. There's this idea that what will happen over a period of time, and that period of time might be 25 years, and appalling to think that we would let somebody who could be benefiting now from access to digital not simply have it, because in 25 years time they'll be replaced by a digitally savvy older people, right? That ain't true. That's not true, because digital, I can't imagine what it's going to be like in another 10 years time, right? And unless I keep up with all those skills, I won't have an IT department, as I'll be retired and stuff. Hopefully, with a 10-year-old and a 9-year-old, I'm never too sure I can ever retire. But do you know what I mean? It's just older people. We'll be.
It's capacities as well as skills.
Yeah,
that's a word borrowed out of the Scottish schools curriculum. The so-called 4 capacities. I can never remember what they all are, but education is to enable young people of Scotland to become successful learners, effective contributors, something like responsible citizens, and another one. And it's capacities, because that was one thing that struck me about that webinar last week about the minimum digital living standard. It's easy to fall into the trap of looking at those things as skills for work.
Yeah,
but they're actually capacities to live.
Yes,
and that's a really subtle difference, and it really is one that I thought Simeon really brought right to the front and right to the center of what he was saying.
Oh, I'm delighted about that.
It was really good.
I believe that in that completely. I think that we're not funded by government or anything, which means I have an open book in terms of discussions with them, with the DFE and others, for instance. But absolutely, I think so. People would say, for instance, during lockdown, children didn't learn anything, and that's true for large numbers of kids, particularly those who are obviously digitally disconnected. But otherwise, children were learning all sorts of things, and it doesn't finish at the school gate. It carries on at home. And I love that. And I think I do see schools being a really integral part of the way people engage with life. There's one really lovely little story which I heard, which is about a girl who was coming up to 6th form, and really where she lived, the only opportunity was going to be for, like everybody else in her community, to go and work in the canning factory, which was kind of down the road and things. And then she arrived at 6th form, and a laptop came as part of that work and stuff. And so she started getting engaged with that. But one of the things she used it for was to have a Facebook page. And she started writing poetry, because she was always writing poetry. And so she wrote poetry and started building this following up, right? And one of the things I love about that is it didn't change her trajectory. Probably too late, whatever. It didn't change her trajectory. And anyway, what are the opportunities for her? And so she continued to work, to move on and work in the canning factory. But if she was asked about who she was, she would describe herself as a poet. And so what I'm saying is that it's not the silver bullet for changing everything overnight, but it gives people a kind of control over themselves and their lives and stuff in a way, which is, and you say that's another example of education. Which
absolutely.
Choices, having choices.
I was just going to, you mentioned Age Concern. A plug for, an example of how digital works these days is that the Scotland telephone befriending service of Age Concern Scotland, or whatever that is called. It can't be called Age UK Scotland, can it? I don't know.
Age much Scotland, longer anyway.
I don't know. Anyway, whatever. No, that's not that. They run the telephone befriending service from Kirkwall. So there's 2 or 3 admin and management jobs there in Kirkwall, and they digitally run the whole telephone befriending system from Orkney.
Right.
Why not?
Goodness.
But the whole
When
of
you've
the
got the digital
whole of
infrastructure,
Scotland.
it doesn't need to be anywhere particular.
Mhm.
No.
So
Yeah.
and there's lots and lots of little examples like that. So it's, I mean, it's that's digital at its kind of infrastructure level,
Yeah, wonderful.
rather than at its kind of individual or skills type.
Yeah.
So it's just
Mm.
it's all interconnected, and it's absolutely great over the last few months. Whether it's just that I've been paying more attention, I don't know, but to see Digital Property Alliance, AbilityNet,
Great organization. Yeah.
the minimum digital living standard. I'm keeping
Simeon.
saying it, and one
Yep.
day I'll get it without thinking about it.
NDLS.
There's
how about that?
all these bits, which are distinct bits of the picture, but they are gradually fitting together.
Thank you. That
Don't
absolutely is what we set out
breathe,
to
and it
do.
might work.
That's what we set out to do, was to say exactly that. I agree. I like that. Breathe. But it was because I saw all this wonderful kind of local community and national organizations, everybody wanting to do things, but all doing it in their own silos, partly because we didn't have much choice during the pandemic, but because we were all stuck in those silos, weren't we? But also because there really wasn't much information around. The only information around in the very early days, which when we started raising the issue, was ONS did this survey, and the question that they asked, and I had to ring the person who, ONS very helpfully put the name of the person who did the research and stuff at the bottom, and the only question they asked was, have you at any time in the last 3 months accessed the internet? And so hardly surprisingly, 93% of those people who were responding, which by and large was predominantly online, so it predominantly online, said yes. And of course, because it wouldn't matter what your circumstances are, you will have had to sign on online. You'd have to do all sorts of things. And I found that, so without that kind of, that was the only piece of information that was around. And so as a result, most people thought everybody was okay. So as a result, everybody did what they wanted to do. They threw devices at schools, and it was fantastic, generous and everything else. But, you know more than anybody, the two of you, just how integrated it needs to be. You need the support, you need the connectivity. And I used to say to people, you can't give a device to a child on Friday with his family on a Friday, her family on a Friday, and expect them to join a Teams meeting on Monday.
Yeah.
I mean, it's difficult enough for us.
Yes. Even if they do have broadband or a huge amount of data on their phone or whatever. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It needs fixing, but it's got to be together. And I have been really, really lucky, and I'm going to be really, really sad to leave it. I have to say, my boy's just coming home, so you'll get a bit of noise in a minute.
Okay. I don't know if you heard, the thunderstorm appeared, which is why I disappeared for a moment.
No.
All the rain was coming in the window, so I had to go and close the window. So.
Sorry,
it's gone now.
We're waiting for that.
The joys of a live show. So Paul, I mean, you were inspired to start the Digital Poverty Alliance. Was there one thing that happened, or you just became overwhelmed with frustration at what needed to happen, or what was the scenario?
Yeah, a bit of that. I inherited some of the frustration of my trustees, and their frustration was simply this, and that is that we were working, Learning Foundation works predominantly with schools to help them to integrate digital into the learning and things. But what they'd found was that schools, for all the reasons, just too much to do, not enough money, not enough time, and that kind of stuff, were not able to adopt it or take it on as quickly as possible. And there's still way more than half the schools in the country still don't really use tech in any substantial form. Pearson have just come out with some research on that, which might be useful to see. And so I think it's like anything, when you've got what you feel is a solution, you want to give it as wide an audience as possible, as quickly as possible. So we thought, how else can we do this? And we'd have to go that route to the home and run through schools. The beauty about going through schools is you work with quite a lot of youngsters quite quickly. If you work in one school, it might be 1,300, 1,400 kids. Sorry, excuse me a minute. There was just 1 second.
Yeah.
So this is really good. It's amazing how all these bits and pieces are sort of all coming together.
Yeah,
you talk about larger, being effective in larger schools.
Yes. And then so what we did instead was to bring a community group together. In the past I'd had corporates mainly because they can help find the funding and that kind of thing. But I found that the corporate often, no matter how committed they might be to change, and they are, I love them for that. is that ultimately they have a corporate job to do, whereas, for instance, these kind of aggregate organizations, so we, for instance, we work with Tech UK as an example. So rather than working with individual companies, we work with a housing association charitable trust, which works on behalf of thousands of housing associations. We work with UK Finance that represent all the banks and things. And the idea being is that they sit around the table, and as they have done really with Kira, you mentioned Kira, and we'd spent the first 18 months just listening. And then the pandemic hit, and I think that what happened then was it showed everybody. So suddenly we became super popular. Yeah. Which was wonderful. And Currys gave us a call. I was suffering with COVID at Christmas 2020, and Currys rang me and said, would £1 million help? I should say so.
Don't you have two? You should have said.
No, yeah. Two. Sweyn, you should have been working with us. I should have said that. Two would be better, but they were wonderful. They were wonderful, and then but they put the power of Currys behind it as well.
Yeah.
So that really got us driving. We found Kira, which again was just a wonderful. But then I know you've met Freddie as well. So I met these wonderful people that who share the same kind of ambitions, the same kind of drive. A little bit less talking, a bit more action. And I'm really pleased to say now that with the National Delivery Plan is about saying to people, if you want to do something, this is the thing to do. And
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to share the tab with that on it. Please talk among yourselves.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
I've only got one screen today.
Go on, Paul.
Go on, Paul.
No, I was going to say, I saw the show when you featured the work we were doing with prison leavers.
Yes.
Well, that was really kind. And that's another example where, these youngsters are leaving with 79 quid in their pocket on a Friday or something. And, good luck. And you can go down to the bottom of that, I think, Sweyn. And there is a link at the bottom there for, there we are.
This one? So there's the forward anyway.
It gives the
Jim Knight, Lord Knight.
So the 6 missions are
missions,
here's the 6 missions.
Yeah.
That's right. And again, Kira would have covered these with you, but the missions are reflect in the National Delivery Plan, reflect the work that Kira did as well. We wanted some kind of continuity about that. And I don't think we've ever whenever we do anything, we're a very small organization. We say to our community, is this right? We don't assume that we've got it right and things. Obviously, partly we're building it from their input anyway, but nobody's contested any of those, and I think it's nice to see that some of them that you will see there are now becoming part of the kind of general kind of conversations and things now. But the issue we've got now, and it's the same issue for many other people and organizations, is that we've got an election coming up, and of course nobody really. So this is not a time for systemic change anyway, but we have an opportunity over the next 6-12 months to be making sure that digital inclusion is included in manifestos and things. And I can say at least one party we know will be doing that or has already made a pledge on that side. It would be nice if all parties did that, but that might be too much. But so our main job at the moment, Pauline and Sweyn, will be actually about awareness raising. And during the pandemic, that was at its height. But right now, I'm still beggars belief the numbers of people who really just don't understand what it means and what the numbers are. I spoke at a GovTech conference just recently, and I talked to them about, they were talking about accessibility, which again, I love to see people in tech recognizing that accessibility is an issue. And I was saying, yeah, but it doesn't matter how many times you tweak a page or change a font or whatever. The reality is that half of the people that could be accessing your site can't even do that. Can't even they haven't get, so there's a big job to be done.
They can't even get to the point of not being able to read it.
Right.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly.
It's funny, but it's not funny.
Yeah, it is funny, but it's not. I agree completely. So it's a big job in front. But I've got the team. Why I'm going, I suppose, is but partly because I was saying earlier on, personally, that we've got other things. I've got 2 youngsters and stuff, and one going up to senior school, and lots of time that needed for that. But also because there's a fantastic team at DPA, and for the first time ever, and they're all bright and young, and and I sort of feel confident I can leave it in their hands. And,
it's a fantastic when you go and look at our people page for the DPA. It's fantastic.
Yes,
At
yes.
least just
It
so
feels like a
friendly,
grassroots.
yeah.
It feels like grassroots growth that, you know, there's room for everybody. You know, you've got scores of people joining as ambassadors, and you know, so it's not just paid people. People are doing this because they really believe in the mission and have passion for it. Like we have. We do all this on
do.
our own time.
I know,
And
I know you do.
it's just, you know, I think once you discover that there's something like this happening in the world or not happening, and you can do something about it, then why would you not get involved? You know? Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
almost a good point to leave it on, because the last thing what I'd like to say is that during the pandemic, one of our ambassadors was on one of, you know, one of the sort of talk shows. I can't remember, Panorama or and she said that the world is only as strong as its weakest link.
Mhm.
And I think that was obviously with reference to pharmaceuticals and things at the time. And it's very easy, isn't it, to say, oh, poor old India's got that problem, you know. Well, and you know, we're sort of slightly smug that we don't anymore. But the reality is that they're the ones who are producing the drugs that we need to give to our children, and, you know, kind of thing. So I can't think of a more apposite, you know, connection than the digital one. So my current view is we can be as digital as we like in England or UK or wherever, but as the minute we stop being able to communicate with great chunks of the world, you know, then South America and, you know, Africa, these emerging powers and stuff, then we're not taking advantage of all of the kind of efficiencies, and I know corporate language, but all of the kind of opportunities that would bring. And so I'm very keen to see if there isn't a way. For instance, one of the governments in Asia came to visit us along with others a couple of weeks ago, thinking that really what they were going to be doing is learning from us, because we are seen as a digital nation. And I felt awful about having to say that. Actually, you know, we've got stuff to learn from you.
Absolutely.
You know? And so that's really important too. I think that's it'd be great.
Well, as I said at the beginning, we didn't cover any kind of awareness weeks or whatever, what's happening. But actually, I've just remembered that this week is Small Charities Week and also Digital Leaders Week. So it seems apposite to be having this conversation because, to my way of thinking anyway, I work with small charities, and you know, they are the ones, and people working in small charities are the ones who reach people on the ground. And they are the ones who can make a difference in people's lives if they are empowered and equipped to do so as well. You know, small charities can be digital leaders, and you know, I'd like to see them more involved in the work. So Paul, we wish you every success, and thank you so much for what you've done. It's just been amazing. You've used your power for good.
Hey,
very much.
And if I can make a last appeal to your listeners, to your viewers and stuff, just to say that, yeah, as always, small charities do need some support and stuff. So if there's anybody out there that's watching that is driven to support us, and then do give us a call. I know that one of the two you'll link with us and make that happen. But it's been, I can't believe I'm here being with you two, and I just absolutely delighted. So thank you so much.
It's been absolutely wonderful to have you.
Yes,
thank you,
absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. Bye. Bye-bye. Computer and so on.
I am, you know, in my 60s now.
Computer and so on.